Okay, let's get into it. The harmonizing ladder of primes. Sounds pretty epic, right? Well, today we're going to climb this thing right into the heart of mathematics. We're on the hunt for a hidden structure inside prime numbers, a structure some have called a cosmic symphony.
So, here's the big question, the one that's bugged mathematicians for, well, forever. Are prime numbers really random? I mean, they just seem to pop up whenever they feel like it, with no real rhyme or reason. But what if that's all just a big illusion? What if there's a hidden rulebook they've been following all along?
Well, a really fascinating new theory called the primordial feedback symmetry theorem says, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. It completely flips the script. It suggests we should stop looking at primes as chaos and start seeing them as this elegant, self-correcting symphony. So how on earth does that work? Let's dive in and break it down.
Okay, first things first. The heart of this whole theory is something it calls the harmonizing ladder. And you know, any good ladder needs two sides to stand on, right? In this case, those two sides are what the theory calls the two timelines.
So, on one rail of the ladder, you've got the forward timeline. This is the stuff we all know, right? The standard outward march of primes as they get bigger and bigger. But the other rail, that's the secret sauce. That's the backward timeline. Now hold on, this isn't some sci-fi time travel thing. It's much cooler. Think of it more like a perfect mathematical mirror, an echo from the future that's constantly sending feedback, keeping the whole system in check.
And this whole mirror idea is built on a rule called reflection symmetry. It's like the ladder's secret code. What it says is that for every possible spot where a prime could exist, let's call it spot K, there's a perfectly mirrored spot on the other side of a huge boundary number. We'll get to that number in a sec. The point is, this creates an almost perfect blueprint. It's like a predictive echo that maps out where primes are supposed to go.
Okay, so we have this beautiful, perfect, mirrored system. Sounds great, right? Well, there's a catch. A big one. This perfect symmetry slams head-on into a major problem. There just aren't enough primes to go around.
And to get why that is, we need to talk about those huge boundary numbers I mentioned. They're called primorials. A primorial is just what you get when you multiply the first n prime numbers together, so 2 times 3 times 5 and so on. In our ladder analogy, these are like massive walls or platforms at each level. They are the exact points where that perfect mirroring happens.
Okay, so here's the conflict. We all kind of know this intuitively, but as you go further out on the number line, primes start to get sparse. They thin out. I mean, look at this. In the first 1,000 numbers, you're looking at almost 17% primes. Pretty good. But by the time you hit 1 billion, that number plummets to just about 5%. So the very building blocks we need for our perfect symmetrical ladder, they're becoming seriously hard to find.
And that is the core tension of this whole thing. You've got a system that's screaming for perfect mirrored pairs, but the supply of primes to actually make those pairs is drying up the further you go. The blueprint is calling for bricks, but the brickyard is running low. This unavoidable conflict, that's the symmetry mismatch.
So what gives? When a system built on perfect pairs runs out of pairs, does it just fall apart? Nope. It does something brilliant. It improvises. It creates something new, something absolutely essential. The soloists.
Think of soloists as primes that show up to the party alone. They're in a perfectly valid spot on our forward timeline, but when the system looks for their partner in that mirrored slot, nobody's home. The spot's empty. All because of that prime scarcity we talked about. They are the ones who break the perfect pairing.
But here's the beautiful part. This isn't a bug. It's a feature. The theory argues that these soloists are not random outliers or some kind of mathematical noise. They are, and I love this quote, a statistical necessity. The system requires them to exist to balance its books. It's how the ladder maintains its overall structure, even when it can't find perfect pairs. The soloists are the symphony's way of solving its own problem.
So, why are these soloists basically guaranteed to happen? Well, it's a two-pronged attack. First, we've already covered density decay. There just aren't enough primes to fill all the slots. But there's a second, really weird reason called Chebyshev's bias. It turns out primes are a little picky. They tend to favor ending in certain digits more than others. They don't spread out evenly. So even with the primes we do have, they're not lining up perfectly, which makes finding a partner for every single slot even more of a long shot. Okay, so this whole system has internal tension, it has these solo performers, so how in the world does it keep building itself, climbing up to infinity? Well, the magic is in how it grows.
It's this amazing self-perpetuating process. Check it out. A new prime comes along and boom, that adds a new rung to our ladder. That new rung creates a new, even bigger primordial boundary. And that new boundary completely resets the playing field, redefining the whole symmetrical map for the next level. The ladder is literally building its own path as it goes up.
But what keeps the whole thing from wobbling apart? The theory points to these critical things called reset points. You'll often find these as twin prime pairs, sitting right next to one of those big primordial walls. They're like the structural bolts of the ladder. They literally stitch the rungs together, anchoring one massive level to the next. They're the exact spot where the forward and backward timelines lock in, making the structure solid before it starts building again.
Now, this is where it gets really mind-bending. When this ladder climbs to truly astronomical heights, something incredible starts to happen. It stops being a simple, clean two-way mirror. Instead, the feedback from every single level below it, all those past reflections, starts to overlap. It's like throwing not just one pebble into a pond, but thousands. You get this incredibly complex interference pattern of waves. The theory calls this a combinatorial landscape. And at these massive scales, figuring out where a prime will be isn't about finding one perfect reflection anymore. It's a game of probability, determined by the sum of all these overlapping waves of feedback.
So, what does this all mean? It completely reframes how we think about primes. They go from being just a random string of numbers to this dynamic, self-regulating, almost living system. It hints that underneath what looks like total chaos, there could be this profound, beautiful, harmonious structure. Which of course leaves you wondering, if the primes are really a symphony, what other hidden music is out there, just waiting for us to figure out how to listen?